Okay, this right here is the remains of the old Birmingham Mineral Railroad. And this was a division of the Louisville and Nashville Railroad. And the Birmingham Mineral Railroad was basically one of the most primary railroads in the Birmingham district for the transportation of coal, limestone, and red ore to the blast furnaces and coke ovens in the area. And this rail bed right here is part of the Gate City branch that was built back in the late 1880s, and it came out of Tarrant, Louisville and Nashville's Boyles Yard, rail yard, and it wound its way all the way through Woodlawn, past what today is the airport, came around through Gate City, came around one section through Red Gap branch of what is today Ruffner Mountain. And this rail bed right here is tracking to the northeast, and this rail bed would take you all the way to Trussville, to where another major blast furnace was being constructed at the time. But this is around the side of the old Ruffner No. 2 mine of Sloss-Sheffield Steel and Iron Company. And just going to take a little walk through the historic mine of Ruffner No. 2, and just take a, I guess what you want to say, a little mine hike video of the mine site. Okay, this is the Ruffner No. 2 mine, ore crusher and ore crusher foundation, and that is what's called a McCulley No. 8 ore crusher, and it's basically the only one of existence anywhere left along Red Mountain, from south of Bessemer all the way to north of Trussville. This is the only one left that's perfectly intact. But this was constructed around 1910, and they used to have a building right here, and it was the generator building to supply electricity to turn the ore crusher, because it took a lot of electricity, a lot of amps and watts to pull that thing to crush the ore. And back before the mine was modified in the 1940s, there would be a ore chute that would come out, and there would be a set of twin rails right here backed up in that ravine. And the Birmingham Mineral Railroad and the Louisville and Nashville would have open rail cars back into that ravine. And so once all the rail cars were filled up, and it's going to be hard to see with the sun, but right back in that direction, veering off to the left, is the spur line of the Birmingham Mineral Railroad that would take it all the way down to the northeast and hook up with its main line, the Gate City branch. But back in this direction is the remains of the heavy media plant. That was basically, it was the iron ore mine's version of a coal washer. And all the iron ore, would be washed once it came through the crusher, came over the conveyor systems. It would be sent there, up through more conveyor systems, back down through here, and there would be a loading chute right here with the basically clean ore, and it would be dumped in the waiting rail cars. But all that took place in the 1940s and 50s with the heavy media plant, and a lot of modifications they did. So, but up this way is they had two rotary dumps right there, and they would bring the ore cars down. There would be two rotary dumps up there. The cars would be upended, and it would go down to a chute system with a conveyor system that would take the ore up to the top of the crusher and dump it in. But this mine originally dates back to around 1892 or so, and going up on either flank of this deep ravine, they had a series of drift mines that went all the way to the top of the mountain. They had drift mines every 60 feet. And back in the 1890s, there's a photograph of this huge wooden loading dock right here. And they had Birmingham mineral rail cars up underneath it. And you can see the tramway lines going up either side of the ravine all the way to the top of the mountain. And this was the main loading dock in the 1890s, where they would take the ore coming out of the drift mines, take it down the little tramway rail cars, bring it over to what was called a self-acting tipple, and basically they had square holes in the dock or in the wood loading platform, and they would just manually dump the ore right into the waiting rail cars of the Birmingham Mineral Railroad. But these are all these concrete remains right here. That's hard to see in the sun, but all this was built in the late 1930s, 1940s. So, but anyway, that's a great example of early mining in the Birmingham area, and that's really the last intact ore crusher in the Birmingham area relevant to the red ore mining. So anyway, just kind of do a walk through here. It's an historic mine site. Now, one of the things, all the mines are closed up here. The mine portal is up this way, and all the drift mines going up on either side, they collapsed and were sealed decades ago. So there's no open mines up here. So, but it's just a nice historic walkthrough of Birmingham's early mining history. So, all right. Okay, one of the things that's noticeable when you come in here is you'll see like a terrace system of old rock retaining walls still in place, and these were built by the miners and the engineers 120 something years ago to prevent erosion and to also protect the rail bed. The rail bed, they stacked up the rail cars back in this ravine here, so you can actually see a lot of the rock retaining walls right here, and walking on back here you can actually and that's an excellent example of an old rock retaining wall right there. But walking on back in here, they had two sets of tracks right here, and they would back the empty rail cars up in there. But it might be hard to see in the sun, but those are the actual cross ties right here. One set of cross ties here for the rails, and the other one you can see the remains of the cross ties, like right there. And they both go straight back into that deep ravine there. And one of the things that's interesting, nobody's ever been able to figure out when they put these pipes in up here at Ruffner number 2, but it evidently ties in with an underground aquifer And to this day, who knows how old those pipes are. To this day, water still comes out of one of the underground aquifers in the mountain. And, you know, if you're up here, you can at least wash your hands. I don't know about drinking it, but you can at least wash your hands. And it never stops running with water. Sometimes after a heavy rain, water will come out of that pipe too. But the drift mines in the tramway bed go up this section, and up here is the mine portal, and up above that is the hoist house. And back in the 1890s, going all the way up the mountain, was a whole other series of drift mines that were operated on what was called the gravity plane or gravity incline system, like they did at so many of the mines at Ruffner. But this deep cut rack here, this is where they stacked up the rail cars. And they would pull them out here, and back in the 1890s had a huge wooden loading dock here. So mine cars would be coming down on either side of this ravine. The mine cars would be switched off to the loading dock. Miners, whoever was working down here in the loading dock, would just take the full mine carts, tip them over through a self-acting tipple, and then dump the contents down into the waiting rail cars of the Birmingham Railroad. So, okay. Okay, back down over there is the ore crusher and the foundation for Ruffner number 2. And directly across the ravine, you can see the giant concrete retaining wall, rock and concrete retaining wall. That is the mine entrance to Ruffner number 2. And further up this way is the remains of the hoist house. And on the other side right here, these are the remains of the drift mines. It might be hard to see in the sun, but these are the remains of some of the drift mines right here that went all the way up the side of the mountain. And right back down and through here is where the manway entrance was. And this was actually also the first rough slope mine to Ruffner number 2. And this is where the hoist house would have sat. The little cable hoist would have sat right here for Ruffner number 2, because they developed a slope mine on this section first in the late 1890s. And then when they reopened this mine and started modifying it in 1909, they moved everything over across the ravine. So, but this is one of the early drift mines right here. You can see the rock retaining wall right there. And one of the interesting things is you can still see the rail lines led straight into the drift mine. And a lot of leaves on the ground. You can't. But those are actually the tramway rails coming out of the mine right there. And you can see they're still in place after 120 plus years. But they would pull the drift mine cars out of here. They had a self-acting, an incline plane gravity-fed system that would lower the waiting mine cars coming out of the drift mine. They would lower them by a 1,000-foot cable hoist. And the loading dock was basically right here. This is where the loading dock was. It was basically right there. Went all the way across the ravine. It was right there. But anyway, that's about 1,000 feet up, going up to the top of the mountain, maybe 1,200 feet. But all along the way, you'll see collapsed drift mines every 60 feet. And it's the same way for going up the other side of the ravine. And way up top, at the very top, on the northwest section up there at the top, there are the remains of hoist system. They had twin cables for the mine cars when they were doing the drift mine operations, and the foundations and the steel rods are still up there. Okay, walking on up this path right here. This is the path the miners would have taken to come up here to get on the get a ride inside the mine cars down into the mine. But back beyond the ore crusher foundation right there, back in the 40s, early 40s, they constructed all new buildings up here. Sloss did, and the miners' bathhouse and lamp house was just beyond where the ore crusher foundation is. Okay. Okay. Coming up here to the Ruffner number 2 right here. All right, and here we go. And you can see they've got the mine sealed off. They did this for bat preservation, and they didn't want people going down into the mines anymore and disturbing the bats. They're trying to stimulate the growth of the bat population. So, but all this was covered up at one time. If you went down into the mine years ago, there was water had created a opening, and you could actually slide all the way down in here and go down into the mine, and pretty much go down about 800-900 feet to hit the water. But the mine branches off to the left. Okay, directly across from where we were at earlier, and that you can see going all the way up the mountain. Those are the remains of the drift mines in the incline tramway bed. So Sloss opened this mine up, the Ruffner number 2, about 1892 or 93, and for whatever reason, after about 5-6 years, maybe by 1900, they had abandoned it, and they had a few more mines up here also, but their 2 biggest mines were down in Bessemer. And back around 1909, the miners were deep underground, and they were getting ready. They were setting off a dynamite charge to go into this new work area, and they hit an underground aquifer. And what happened was, it was so bad that in just no short time at all, it completely flooded out their 2 mines down there. And Sloss-Sheffield, they had to have iron ore for the furnaces. So they came up here and they decided to reopen the Ruffner number 2 to go ahead and modify it to construct a hoist house, and they built everything over here on this side. And that's when they came in here and they constructed this new mine portal. And I'll see if I can shine a light down in here, but these were actually drift mines, and what they did is they encased everything in concrete, covered up the drift mine entrances, and then they started, this is where they built their main slope mine. So this stayed in operation for a couple of years, well, I think till about 1912, 1913, and then they shut it down again. Then they reopened it for World War I, shut it down after World War I, reopened it again, late 20s, early 30s, shut it down again, reopened it for World War II, a few years later shut it down, then they opened it back up, I think in 1949, 48, 49, and it operated till, I think 1957, when iron ore, deep underground iron ore mining was really coming to an end in the Birmingham district. So, anyway, But the mine cars would come straight up out of here, and they would come in a series of 3 or 4, sometimes even 5, and they would be pulled up by the hoist house, and then they would be switched over and sent down to the 2 rotary tipples. But I'll shine a light in there, see what it looks like. Now, one of the more interesting things is most of the mining companies, when they shut these mines down, they sent teams down into the mines to salvage these rails and break them apart and lift them up and bring them up out of here, because, you know, they were pretty valuable and they could be used for scrap iron, melted down. But Sloss, or it was later U.S. Pipe that bought Sloss, U.S. Pipe and Foundry, they just decided to leave the rails in place. So, but you can look inside there, and it's the twin. There's a twin set of tracks that switch off to the left, and you can actually see some of the electrical insulators on the side of the wall. But this is the main slope, and this mine went all the way underneath what is today Norfolk Southern's Norris Rail Yards. Back in the day, that was Southern Railroad. But the depth of this mine was about 850 feet before they quit mining in depth from the surface. And like I said, it went all the way down, pretty much all the way under the Norris Rail Yards, which would be to the southeast from here. So, but anyway, it's a really historic mine right here, and like I said, they've got it gated off and for the bat preservation. So, all right. And we'll check out the hoist house remains up there and look at a couple other things. Okay, we've got the Ruffner #2 mine portal right here, and it's a fairly steep down angle. Not sure what degree it is. Could be 16, 17 degree down angle going into the mine. But right here, the rails coming out of the mine would come up here, and the hoist house sat right up here. And the hoist operator would actually pull all the mine cars almost up to where the hoist house was. There would be a person to switch off the rails, and they would be sent all the way down to where you had a dual rotary dump right there, and you had a big shop right here. And back beyond, towards the end of the wood line right there, is where they had the car repair shop and machine shop, was further down this way. They had another building up over here for miscellaneous storage, and back on the other side, way up over here, still have the remains of the magazine storage building where they stored the dynamite and powder. So, but the hoist house is right up here. And like I said, these were all drift mines back in the 1890s. Remains of drift mines here, and like I said, they just covered everything up, and they used some of the lower drift mines, and this is what they created Ruffner #2 out of. So, but go up here and check out the hoist house here. Okay, the mine portal is straight down through there. Probably can't see it because of the sun. But anyway, these are the hoist house. This is the hoist house remains of Ruffner number 2 right here. And they constructed all this, like I said, around 1910. And yeah, the side wall right here. And this section right here is where the big cable hoist sat. Actually sat on these mounts right here. And this was a Hardy Tines electric mine cable hoist. And it probably had about 2,500 feet of heavy duty cable, which there's some remains of right there. This was an electrically operated mine cable hoist. And like I said, probably had about 2,500 feet of cable on it. But this is the size of the cable hoist right here. I think that's about 1 3/4 inches maybe, which was standard for a lot of the mines operating along Red Mountain back then. But cable hoist was right here. Not sure where the cable hoist operator could get a set right here, back here. But all the mines, when they kept getting more modernized, they had an underground signal system set along electrical lines going down into the mine, and different bell signals and whatnot would indicate where the mine cars were if they were ready to come out. It was a elaborate bell hoisting system for the mine hoist operator and for the miners down below, to be able to operate safely, to bring these mine cars up and out of the mine and back into them. But let's see. Let's see, I think there's some more. So you still got a lot of the huge rods right there, threaded rods right there to hold all this machinery in place. But there's actually some whatever it's doing up here, actually whole sections of old mine cable hoist right there. So and one of the things the mining companies did, because especially TCI, they fabricated all this sheet metal, and a lot of the mining companies, when they were constructing all these buildings, they just used fabricated sheet metal to, they'd get a concrete foundation, put up wooden beams, wooden supports, and then they would just encase it in sheet metal. So very economical to do this. And that little gray piece of board right there, that was actually electrical control board. There's another one right over there. Okay, here's another shot of the Ruffner number 2 hoist house remains. And one of the things mentioned earlier about the sheet metal sections right here that covered up a lot of the, just about all the buildings and mine structures and everything, is you can see remnants of them right here. And one of the reasons why they're just laying everywhere is after this mine was shut down, of course, U.S. Pipe and Foundry had bought Sloss-Sheffield Steel and Iron, so this was operated by U.S. Pipe and Foundry in the 1950s before they shut it down. And then they were bought later by Jim Walters Corporation. And so the whole mine lay dormant. All the structures were intact, the mine was open, everything. I think it was 1971. Somebody had the great idea, Jim Walters, I guess, to one of the buildings down here to store, I guess it was maybe 1,000 pounds of ammonium nitrate. And ammonium nitrate, I guess if not properly maintained in a climate controlled condition, well, things can happen. And I think it was on in 1971, I think in the summertime, there was a massive explosion. It was the equivalent of, like, I don't know, I've heard something like 100 or 200 500-pound bombs going off. And anyway, the explosion was so great that it just blew away all the structures. I mean, it cracked windows all the way in Roebuck Springs. I mean, it was like an earthquake that people felt for miles when that ammonium nitrate went off. And anyway, the force was so great, the shock wave, that it just blew away the buildings. Any structure up here around the mine site was just decimated. So that's one of the reasons why you see, if you walk around in the woods, you see all these pieces of sheet metal. Well, that's what happened. The shock waves just blew the buildings away and sent the sheet metal sections of it flying all through the woods and along the side of the mountain. So, and Jim Walters had to come up here and clean everything up, and there was this huge outcry about, what they had done. And so for a series of good public relations, they knew they couldn't construct anything out here along the mountain because, homes and such, because of all the mines. So they just took this whole section. I think it's like 1,400 acres, maybe larger, 1,500 acres. And that's when they decided to make it into a park. And that's when, I think 1977, that's when all this was donated, and they created the Ruffner Mountain Nature Preserve. And that's what it is today. So, but before they donated the land and everything, they went and sealed up all the mines, and that was originally sealed up manway entrances, drift mines. I mean, they just closed off and bulldozed everything, so there would be no liability before they donated this land to the city or to a trust to make the Ruffner Mountain Nature Preserve. So anyway, that's the way it is today. So okay, and we'll just walk on back down here to where the ore chutes are, top of the crusher. Then we'll head back down through the woods and hopefully be able to see the compressor house remains and the water reservoir, which is further down. Anyway, that's a good shot looking down into the mine right here, and gives you a good view of the deep ravine where the rail cars were stacked up. Like I said, the tramway line and the drift mine's going up this way, and the hoist house is back up over there. Back before they cleared all this 5-6 years ago maybe, all of this was overgrown. There was just a little narrow trail to come back through here, and all this was completely covered over, all the way back through here, completely with dirt. And they had huge 12x6 boards covering up the mine, but water had, through a series of decades, had gone down and created a big opening, and people could start from right here, jump off, and go slide down into the mine. But they came up, they did a really good job of clearing all this out, putting the bars up, and preserving this history right here. So anyway, nice day to be out here walking. Beautiful day on the mountain. Okay, one of the things is just a little side note right here. This big concrete pad right there, kind of sticking out. That was a shop building that was up the top here, and that was for just miscellaneous storage. They had all kinds of little buildings around here, but back just right here through those trees is where the big car maintenance building was, the shops, maintenance shops, and they all right here is where they had rail lines coming up out of the mine. The hoist house is back up there, and they had rail lines going down through here. But this right here was the main rail line coming out of the mine for the mine carts loaded with ore. And of course there's a nice big section of hematite red ore right there. And this right here was the weight scale. Right here they had a series of scales right here, and of course they always factored in the empty weight of the mine car. But when they would come down through here, they would have a system of weight scales right here, and there would be a basically a tally house operator right here, and he would record the weight of the ore, because they had to keep track of how much ore was mined every day and extracted out of the mine. But right here was the twin rotary dumps right here. This was the loading shaft, and you had two. They were constructed originally by Erskine Ramsey, and they had two cars that would go into the mine, into the rotary tipple. Okay, right here was the ore chute, and you had two rotary tipples right here where the mine cars would go in, and there would be a system that they would just roll them over, and the ore would go down into the chute, and it would be transferred by a conveyor system up to the top of the ore crusher right there, and the contents would be dumped in. And anything like that was not iron ore, tailings, shale, sandstone, anything that was not iron ore, they had a system designed to where that would be sent on a separate conveyor system and sent out towards what was called a rock pile or a rock bin. But all down below was the heavy media concentrate, or the heavy media plant, other buildings, and just had a tremendous system of conveyors for sending the ore up through the media plant, up through the, there would be a big structure over there to hold the ore. Another conveyor system would send it down to the loading chute where they would be loaded onto the iron cores and the rail cars, I mean. But all this was actually done in the 1940s and 50s for all this modification. But this is where the cars would be dumped over by a rotary tipple, and the contents went straight down in here. So, okay. Okay, this is where the ore chutes were right here when the mine cars were dumped over from the rotary tipple, and they had two conveyor systems for the ore, but one could be substituted for tailings, rock, sandstone, shale, stuff like that was not going into the ore crusher. But this is the ore crusher right here to number 2. And this is, they built this the last. Right here. Huh. Let's see, it looks like it's falling down. Anyway, though, but this is That's one of the intact chutes right there. And you can see where when they just piled dirt over this stuff, you know, you see all the dirt just came down there and they just sealed it up. Jim Walters did. But they built this to last. Right there. So you can see if you can read that. That's a number 8 McCully ore crusher, power and mining machine, and it came out of Uday, Wisconsin. And they put this here when they opened the mine up, when they reopened it in 1910. So you could just imagine they had to rail this all the way down from Wisconsin, then bring it up here. And through a series of blocking tackles. I don't know how they did it, because this thing is, it's just no telling how heavy this is. They had to put it up here in sections and bolt it in with this. See the size of those bolts. So anyway, it was built to last a millennia. But anyway, right down there, back up there, there's where the open rail cars of the Birmingham Railroad, Louisville and Nashville Railroad, they were stacked right up into that ravine. It's a nice little drop down. So, alright. And you can see all the foundation remains to the structures. And that's actually a set of wooden stairs right there. You can't really tell, but they had a set of stairs coming up here. And they had a little, like I said, a powerhouse building generator specifically placed here to power the ore crusher, because that took a lot of electricity to do. Thought I'd do a little look inside the guts of the ore crusher right here. This is the spindle right here. All this was covered up right here, of course. And this is the chute system right here, and the ore would come out of the top and it would be crushed. But that right there, that section of rail is like 1910 or so. And they just put that down there for an extra foundation support for the ore crusher. Still in place. So, right up in there. Very historic. One of a kind. Alright. And here's another little section of rail right here. That's actually an old section of tramway rail right there. I don't know what it's doing up here. But they did use a lot of rail sections for building supports back then. Okay. Okay, so just a final look at the ore crusher at Ruffner number 2. Okay, and we're going to walk out this way, and like I said, the rail bed originally went around to the left, and there was a long spur line that ran above and alongside the Birmingham Railroad's Gate City branch line and met up with it way down there, merged with it probably a quarter of a mile further to the northeast in the woods. So, and we're going to walk out this way. Okay, this is the Birmingham Mineral Railroad bed, what was called the Gate City branch. And like I said, this went all the way to Trussville. And walking this, see if I can, the sun's not too bad, see if I can zero in on the Ruffner #2 spur line rail bed. And yeah, there it is. So you have this deep ravine right here that they filled in, and underneath that you have the culverts, the stone culverts. But yeah, straight up through there, that raised bed, that is the Birmingham Mineral Railroad Ruffner #2 spur line rail bed up there. And you can see it sits about a good 60 feet higher than we're at right now, and it went down on a gentle downgrade all the way about a quarter mile from here, maybe a half a mile. Yeah, probably more like a half a mile. And then it would join up with this main rail bed here. So, a lot of history, mining and railroad history out here. So, okay. Okay, this is the side of the air compressor house for Ruffner #2, right here. And like I said, it was a big building. And you can see that it was covered in sheet metal, which was readily available and made in Birmingham, mostly made by TCI. TCI just was huge into making this sheet metal that would be used for buildings. It was very economical. Anyway, the compressor house sits right over the main slope of Ruffner #2, and it held huge air tanks in here. And what would happen is there were shafts, holes that went straight down into the main slope on either side of it, and huge rubber hoses would be sent, would snake down into the mine, and they would just stretch all out underneath the mine. And you know, up and for many years, the miners, that's how they operated the drills, drilling for the iron ore to place the dynamite. They used compressed air drills. So it was very important to have a compressor house. No mine along Red Mountain operated without a compressor house and with air compressors to operate their drills. So we're directly over the main slope of Ruffner #2, and the water reservoirs to the south. So anyway, just stopped video this, and the tanks were situated on each one of these mounts right here. So, okay. Okay, this is one of the big water reservoirs right here at Ruffner #2. It's located further to the south of the mine. And you can see the remains. They built these huge berms almost in a rectangular fashion. There's another one directly ahead of me over that berm. But they were built in order to have a place for the water to go when they kept pumping it out of the mine. That's one thing about the mines, coal mines, red ore mines, is that there are an incredible amount of underground aquifers deep under the valley. And as the mines kept getting deeper, they would run into underground aquifers, and they had to have sump pumps and a series of pumping systems and large pipelines to keep pumping this water out of the mine. Some of the mines along Red Mountain average 2 million gallons a day being pumped out of these mines. So you had to have some place for the water to go. So they built these huge, if you want to say dams, big reservoirs to hold the water. And one of the interesting things about these berms is they were made out of tailings, rocks, shale, sandstone that came out of the mine. So this is where they used a lot of the rocks and tailings that came out of the mine other than the red iron ore. And they used all these tailings to construct these big berms right here to hold the water being pumped out of Ruffner number 2. So when they reopened the Ruffner number 2, I think they started reopening in 1939 because World War I had commenced, and of course there was a lot of need for steel. Took them several months, but they had to pump 60 million gallons of water out of the mine to drain the mine, and that's really nothing, because one of the mines up on the mountain that was flooded with water, it stayed flooded for a year, and they pumped 2.5 billion gallons out of that mine to reopen it. So, but anyway, there's a water pump transfer station on the other side of this berm with a little electrical substation. Okay, this is the remains of the Ruffner number 2 water pumping station. This was the electrical substation right here. You can see they have a lot of pipe remains right there. So they also did, if the water, one of the things, if the water got too high, you might not be able to see, there's a pipe right near the top. And if the water reached the crest of the berm, the water would just come through here. And sometimes they release the water going out this way. That's why you have these pipes right here. If the water got too full, they needed to, drain the water, more water coming in from the mine, they would just release it out through this way. But this is the electrical station right here, the water, basically the water transfer station pumping. So, right here, and you see they had a mount for the electrical engine right there. And this right here is, you can see the wood remains right here. This was an electrical substation at one time. It's now deep in the woods, but just think back then all this was cleared off. But you can still see some of the insulators up there. So, anyway, that's about all that remains. There is a water pumping station on the next berm, if it hasn't eroded and disappeared. So, anyway, but this is just one of the many little forgotten sections of the Ruffner number 2 mine site right here. And you can see all the shale and rock and everything they stacked up to make that berm. So, okay, and we'll head over to the next water reservoir berm. Okay, this is the second water reservoir to Ruffner number 2, and it's been some years since I've been down here, but have seen it with about 5 feet of water in it. And this is one of the big pipes right here, still in place right here. It pumped the water out of the, came right out of the mine. So, and this is how they pumped it right into these reservoirs. And I guess it's been some years, but the little dock has collapsed. This used to be a little dock. Used to come out, and whatever engineer or employee with the Ruffner number 2 mine would come down here and check on what kind of equipment, how this operated, I don't know. But you can see it's finally collapsed over time. But that was actually a little wooden dock, just like you'd see at a lake. And at one time, it was standing all the way out to here, and it's collapsed over time. wood's rotted and everything, but that's all that remains beside the electrical pumping station on the other one. This is all that remains of it. So anyway, that'll kind of wind up the mine hike at the Ruffner number 2 historic mine site. And there's a lot more could have covered, but just due to time constraints, hopefully this will be good enough. So, all right.